The soft, rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor was a perverse lullaby, a stark counterpoint to the thunderous silence that had just exploded inside Eleanor Vance's meticulously ordered mind. Her breath, usually a measured, controlled intake, hitched somewhere in her throat, a sharp, unwelcome gasp that threatened to betray her hidden presence. Through the narrow slit of the hospital room door, she saw him. Not the hunched figure in the faded grey jumpsuit she knew from Apex Innovations, but a man in pristine light blue scrubs, his strong, calloused hand gently clasping the frail, tiny one of a sleeping child. This was Michael Thompson, the night shift janitor, the man whose inexplicable absences had become an irritating itch in her otherwise flawless corporate machine. But this wasn't his world, and what he was doing here, what she was seeing, was shattering every preconceived notion she'd built around him, around her company, and perhaps around her entire understanding of control and consequence. The shock had rendered her immobile, a statue in the sterile hospital corridor, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the highly polished floors, mimicking the cold, hard gleam of her own rigid convictions. His whispered words, too soft to decipher, were directed at the little girl, an 8-year-old no older than her own niece. A wave of nausea, sharp and unexpected, twisted in Eleanor's gut. The janitor, the doctor, the father, the pieces were colliding violently in the quiet hum of the critical care unit, and the reverberations, she knew, would change everything. Just hours earlier, the world had been a far more predictable place. Eleanor Vance had sat perched atop Apex Innovations, a gleaming monument of glass and steel piercing the Chicago skyline on North Michigan Avenue. As chief executive officer, she commanded an empire built on innovation, efficiency, and a ruthless pursuit of perfection. Every quarterly report was an extension of her own formidable will, every employee a cog in a meticulously designed machine. Her reputation preceded her like a chilly wind, sharp, unyielding, brilliant. Some called her cold, others a genius, but no one dared call her anything less than utterly effective. This steely resolve, this unwavering demand for control, had not been born from a desire for power alone, but from a crucible of past devastation. Years ago, a critical system failure, a tiny overlooked detail in a complex process, had cost her family dearly, leaving her with an unshakable belief that every minute detail mattered, every loose end a potential catastrophe. That belief had built Apex into the behemoth it was, but it had also encased Eleanor's heart in a fortress of calculated logic. For weeks, a curious anomaly had persistently snagged her attention amidst the endless stream of data and analytics. It wasn't a glitch in a new software update, nor a dip in market projections, but something far more mundane, yet equally jarring to her sense of order. Michael Thompson, one of Apex's night shift janitors. His name, initially just a line in a shift report, had begun to appear with an asterisk of concern in the meticulously compiled nightly surveillance logs. He was consistently missing from his assigned rounds for irregular, yet precise, blocks of time. Eleanor had personally reviewed the footage, hours of it. Michael was a phantom for 47 minutes, then 72, then 61, always returning, always completing his duties. His work was, maddeningly, impeccable. Every surface in the cavernous building was spotless by dawn, every trash bin emptied, every glass partition gleaming. There were no missing items, no signs of unauthorized access to restricted areas. Yet, the unexplained absences gnawed at Eleanor's ordered mind, a discordant note in the symphony of her corporate empire. It hinted at a breach, a flaw in the system she presided over, a potential weakness that, if left unchecked, could fester and become the next catastrophe. Her initial suspicions were cold, calculated. He might be stealing company property, smuggling out proprietary information, or perhaps moonlighting for a competitor, a blatant disregard for Apex's strict employment policies. Each possibility ignited a flicker of controlled anger within her. Loyalty to Eleanor was paramount, a foundational pillar of trust. To exploit the company that provided his livelihood, even as a janitor, was an unforgivable offense. The standard procedure would have been to flag his file, initiate a quiet internal investigation through human resources, perhaps even confront him. But Eleanor, driven by a visceral need for absolute, undeniable answers, a need born from the shadows of her past, decided to take a drastic, utterly uncharacteristic step. She would investigate herself, privately, clandestinely. She needed to see it, to understand it, with her own eyes. And so, on a crisp Tuesday night in early October, as the city lights began to twinkle like scattered diamonds below her penthouse office, Eleanor put her plan into motion. She changed from her power suit into more discreet, yet still elegant, dark clothing. She retrieved the keys to her obsidian-tinted SUV, a vehicle as sleek and unyielding as her own persona, and descended to the employee parking lot beneath the massive structure on North Michigan Avenue. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain and distant exhaust. She waited, a silent, imposing shadow, as the night shift began to thin out. At precisely 1 o'clock in the morning, Michael Thompson appeared. He was a man in his late 30s, with tired eyes that seemed to carry the weight of unseen burdens, and a stoic demeanor that betrayed little emotion. He wore the standard Apex janitor's uniform, the muted grey fabric hanging loosely on his frame. He moved with a quiet efficiency, punching out on the time clock, his movements devoid of any wasted energy, almost as if he were conserving something precious. Then, he slipped quickly into his battered dark blue Ford Ranger pickup truck, its once vibrant paint faded by years of sun and countless Chicago winters. The truck coughed to life, a low rumble breaking the stillness of the underground garage, and then slowly pulled out of its parking space. Eleanor, a silent hunter, followed. The journey began with the familiar glitter of downtown Chicago. Michael's truck, a humble vessel amidst a sea of luxury cars, navigated the grid of brightly lit streets. Eleanor, maintaining a careful distance, watched his taillights as they left the gleaming skyscrapers behind. Her initial theories of corporate espionage or petty theft began to feel increasingly absurd with each passing mile. This wasn't the route a corporate spy would take to a clandestine meeting, nor a thief returning to a hidden stash. Instead, Michael drove through the vibrant, upscale neighborhoods of Wicker Park, where trendy boutiques and bustling cafes were settling into their nocturnal quiet, then into the more artistic and eclectic Logan Square, with its grand boulevards and historic architecture. The journey felt aimless yet precise, like a thread unwinding from a spool, leading her further and further from her realm of glass towers and digital screens. Then, the urban landscape began to shift. The vibrant, gentrified neighborhoods gave way to the quieter, working-class districts of the South Side. Here, the brick bungalows nestled close to corner bodegas, their neon signs casting a warm, nostalgic glow on the sidewalks. The streets were less manicured, the buildings older, imbued with a different kind of history, a narrative of resilience and community. Eleanor, a stranger in this part of her own city, felt an unfamiliar prickle of unease, a sense of being out of place, an intrusion into a world she rarely acknowledged existed beyond the spreadsheets of demographic data. Michael's truck, however, seemed to belong here, a quiet presence in the quiet streets. Her theories, once so solid and logically constructed, crumbled further when his battered Ford Ranger eventually pulled into the parking lot of Coma Children's Hospital. The renowned medical facility, affiliated with the prestigious University of Chicago, stood illuminated against the encroaching darkness, its emergency room entrance glowing brightly, a beacon of urgency and hope. Eleanor found a discreet spot across the street, nestled among a cluster of older, taller buildings, her heart hammering with a mixture of confusion and an unsettling premonition. This was not the haunt of thieves. What she observed next from her hidden vantage point completely upended her perception of reality, shattering the carefully constructed image of Michael Thompson. He quickly, almost furtively, changed out of his janitor's uniform in the truck's cabin, his movements practiced and efficient. Then he donned a set of light blue medical scrubs, strikingly similar to those worn by the doctors and nurses she sometimes saw in her own company's on-site clinic. Her mind raced, grasping for an explanation. Was he moonlighting as a medical technician? A cleaner in another hospital? But the clothes suggested something more. He emerged from the truck, no longer the stoic, tired janitor, but a figure imbued with a subtle, unshakable authority. He walked with a purpose that was both gentle and deliberate, navigating the hospital entrance with an effortless familiarity. He greeted nurses by name, their brief, respectful exchanges indicating a deeper, familiar connection. Even a few doctors, recognizable from their hurried passages through the emergency room, offered him a polite nod, a quiet acknowledgement that resonated with deference. He wasn't an intruder here. He was known. He belonged. But how? And why? Eleanor watched, transfixed, as Michael arrived at a pediatric ward on the 4th floor, the glow of the overhead lights casting long shadows down the quiet corridor. He paused at a room, its door slightly ajar, then pushed it open gently and stepped inside. Eleanor, propelled by an irresistible force, slipped from her hiding spot, crossing the street with an almost reckless disregard for her usual caution, and made her way into the hospital, her heels clicking softly on the polished floors. She kept to the shadows, her eyes fixed on the partially open door, her breath held captive in her chest. Inside, a little girl lay frail and still in a hospital bed, no older than 8 years old. Her small body was connected to an array of monitoring equipment that beeped rhythmically, the gentle electronic pulse of life. This was Lily, his daughter, the man who cleaned her office floors, the man she suspected of nefarious activities, was a single father, whose little girl was fighting for her life. The cold, sterile environment of the hospital room was filled with the silent roar of a father's love. Eleanor, peering through the gap in the door, saw Michael sit by Lily's bedside. He didn't just sit, he interacted. He reached for a worn copy of Charlotte's Web and began to read aloud, his voice a soothing low rumble that seemed to calm the frantic rhythm of the heart monitor. He read with an emotional resonance that went beyond mere storytelling, each word a quiet promise of protection and hope. When he finished the chapter, he gently sang a lullaby, its melody simple and profound, a balm to the girl's fragile existence. Lily stirred slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips, and then settled back into her restless sleep. A young resident entered the room, his face creased with exhaustion, to check on Lily. Michael engaged him, not as a concerned, overwhelmed parent, but with a nuanced understanding of complex medical terminology. He questioned treatment protocols, suggesting alternative approaches with a quiet confidence that made the resident pause, listen, and even nod thoughtfully. The resident, though senior in title, listened intently, acknowledging Michael's profound insights, a silent exchange of respect and expertise. This wasn't the behavior of a janitor, nor even a well-informed parent. This was the voice of a professional, someone intimately familiar with the intricate dance of life and death in a medical setting. Suddenly, a distant, forgotten memory sparked in Eleanor's mind, a flicker of recognition from an old university alumni magazine. The name Dr. Michael Thompson, pediatric intensivist. A brilliant career, tragically ended years ago after a personal loss. The pieces clicked into place, an uncomfortable, devastating revelation. This ordinary janitor, whose quiet competence she had dismissed as merely efficient, was a highly skilled medical professional, now a shadow of his former self. He was taking on the most humble of jobs, the lowest rung on the corporate ladder, to remain close to his critically ill daughter. He was volunteering at the hospital, using his breaks from his janitorial work, driven by a profound need to protect and nurture his child, not with money, but with his very presence and skill. His objective, heartbreakingly clear, was simply to keep Lily alive, to find a way to circumvent the towering costs of her experimental treatments, a rare genetic condition that insurance, even with Apex's robust plan, barely touched, and to rebuild his shattered life, one quiet, invisible act of love at a time. The weight of her past, the loss that had made her so ruthlessly efficient, collided with the raw, undeniable grief she now witnessed. The hidden talent, the immense sacrifice, the quiet dignity of this man operating far beneath his capabilities, all crashed against Eleanor's own buried sorrow. Her need for control, her initial suspicion of theft, now seemed almost obscene, trivial in the face of such profound human struggle. Her corporate vision, once so sharp and unyielding, blurred at the edges, dissolving into a new, uncomfortable awareness of the human cost of purely profit-driven systems. Michael Thompson was not a threat to her system. He was a devastating indictment of it. The questions that had driven her here, fueled by suspicion and a rigid sense of order, now felt small, insignificant. A new purpose, profound and urgent, began to emerge from the wreckage of her preconceptions, and for the first time in years, Eleanor Vance felt a tremor in the impenetrable fortress around her heart. The sterile hum of the hospital corridor, once a background drone, now vibrated with the violent tremors of Eleanor's internal world. She stood frozen, a statue carved from shock and a dawning, crushing guilt. The image of Michael Thompson, gentle and commanding in scrubs, cradling his daughter's hand, was seared into her mind, obliterating every logical calculation, every suspicion, every cynical projection she had meticulously built. The man she had deemed a potential threat, a breach in her system, was in fact a man fighting an invisible war for the life of his child. Her initial objective, born of cold corporate precision, now felt like a grotesque mockery of human suffering. A silent scream threatened to escape her, but Eleanor, ever the master of self-control, forced it back down, a raw, burning ember in her chest. The quiet rhythmic beeping from Lily's room, a constant reminder of life's fragile hold, seemed to underscore the profound chasm between her life of opulent towers and Michael's desperate battle in fluorescent-lit hospital wards. She retreated, her movements slow and deliberate, back down the corridor, her high heels barely whispering against the polished floor. The city outside, a glittering tapestry of ambition and commerce, now seemed distant, unreal. She drove home on autopilot, the familiar route a blur of neon and concrete. Her penthouse apartment, usually a sanctuary of quiet power, felt hollow, the sweeping views of the city a stark contrast to the grimy working-class neighborhoods she had just traversed. She paced, the silence amplifying the frantic rhythm of her thoughts. Michael Thompson, the janitor, the doctor, the father. How could she have been so utterly, catastrophically wrong? Her past, the wound that had shaped her into the formidable CEO of Apex Innovations, clawed at her. A system failure, an overlooked detail, had led to a loss so profound it had scarred her forever, hardening her resolve, forging her belief in absolute control. Yet here was a man whose life had been similarly shattered by systemic failures, by overlooked details, by the very cold logic she herself embraced, and he was fighting back not with corporate power, but with raw, unadulterated love. He hadn't stolen company property. He had stolen slivers of time to be a father, a doctor, a protector. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. She had pursued him with the meticulousness of a predator, only to discover a profound, heartbreaking innocence. As the first rays of dawn painted the Chicago skyline in hues of gold and rose, Eleanor made a decision. Her purpose, which had been so singularly focused on Apex's bottom line, now shifted with an unexpected force. This wasn't about charity, which Michael's quiet pride would surely reject. This was about justice, about redemption, about utilizing his immense hidden talents, not just to save his daughter, but to dismantle the very structures that had allowed his tragedy to unfold. Her new mission felt both daunting and exhilarating, a radical departure from the spreadsheet-driven world she inhabited. Meanwhile, Michael Thompson, oblivious to the secret watcher who had just unraveled his meticulously constructed double life, was preparing for another day. He had spent the remaining hours of his break in Lily's room, not sleeping, but meticulously updating a digital spreadsheet on a worn laptop. It contained every vital sign, every medication dosage, every subtle change in Lily's rare mitochondrial disease. He cross-referenced it with obscure medical journals and experimental therapy trials, his eyes, even in the dim light of the hospital room, sharp and focused, still the eyes of a brilliant physician. He had read Charlotte's Web again, then sung the lullaby twice, his voice raspy from lack of sleep, but infused with an inexhaustible love. As the hospital awakened, the shift change approaching, Michael performed his ritualistic transformation. In the cramped space of his pickup truck, he shed the light blue scrubs, carefully folding them, and donned his Apex janitor's uniform. The transformation was more than a change of clothes. It was a psychological shift, a deliberate act of shedding his true self, preparing to become invisible again. The weight of his unproven guilt, the lingering shadow of his wife Sarah's death, pressed down on him, a constant companion. He carried the burden of knowing the fault lay not with him, but with systemic failures and inadequate resources. Yet the official record and his own heart remained unconvinced. He drove back towards Apex Innovations, his battered Ford Ranger a familiar sight on the early morning streets. The city was stirring, a symphony of honking horns and rushing commuters. Michael, however, remained in his own quiet world, his mind a whirlwind of medical data and paternal fear. He thought of Lily, her small, resilient smile, the fight in her eyes even as her tiny body weakened. Her rare mitochondrial disease, a cruel echo of the unknown factors in Sarah's demise years ago, was slowly stealing her strength. The insurance benefits from his janitor's salary, a meager offering compared to the specialized treatments Lily required, barely scratched the surface of the costs. Each experimental therapy, each consultation with a specialist, was a monumental financial hurdle. His janitorial job at Apex was more than just a means to an end. It was a strategic necessity. The income, however insufficient, provided a baseline of stability. The late-night shifts allowed him the precious hours to volunteer at Coma, to be with Lily, to research, to fight. The hospital's medical library, a treasure trove of knowledge, became his second home during his breaks. He devoured every article, every study, every obscure clinical trial related to mitochondrial diseases, clinging to the desperate hope of finding a cure, a treatment, anything that could give Lily a fighting chance. He was, in essence, an outcast doctor, a father fighting an invisible war against a system that had first broken him, then his daughter. Michael clocked in, the familiar beep of the time clock a jarring contrast to the rhythmic hum of Lily's life support. He picked up his mop and bucket, his hands once deft with surgical instruments, now expertly wielding a squeegee. He moved through the gleaming hallways of Apex, a ghost in the dawn, cleaning, polishing, emptying trash bins. He saw Eleanor Vance's office, its expansive windows offering a panoramic view of the city. He'd never seen her at night, never truly thought of her as anything more than the formidable name on the company letterhead. Their worlds, he believed, were entirely separate, entirely distinct. He was the invisible servant, she, the untouchable queen. The idea that she had secretly followed him, had witnessed his most vulnerable moments, was a reality so far-fetched, so utterly unbelievable, that it never crossed his mind. Later that morning, Eleanor sat in her office, the cold precision of her corporate persona battling the emotional tempest raging within her. The surveillance reports, once a tool of control, now felt like a cruel joke. Every detail, every missing minute, had a face, a name, a heartbreaking story. She began to discreetly gather information, not about Michael's supposed infractions, but about his past. Old university records, medical archives, public news articles, anything that could shed light on the brilliant Dr. Michael Thompson. It wasn't difficult for someone with her resources to unearth the fragments of his shattered career. The story that emerged was even more tragic than she had imagined. Years prior, Michael Thompson had been a rising star at Coma, a beloved pediatric intensivist, renowned for his innovative approaches and compassionate bedside manner. He had a future that promised groundbreaking research and countless lives saved. Then, a devastating medical error during a complex surgery, which led to the untimely death of his wife, Sarah. The details were murky in the public record, a rare complication, an unexpected reaction. Michael, though cleared of direct malpractice, was emotionally devastated. The hospital administration, however, under pressure to avoid a major lawsuit and protect its reputation, subtly manipulated the narrative, needing a scapegoat. Michael, consumed by grief and a profound unproven guilt, had been forced to relinquish his license and step away from medicine. He carried the unproven guilt of her death, a wound that festered even as he knew the fault lay elsewhere, in systemic failures and inadequate resources, factors that a less scrupulous administration would have openly acknowledged. The parallels between Sarah's death and Lily's current condition were chillingly precise. Sarah's demise had been attributed to a rare, sudden complication, an unknown factor. Now Lily's mitochondrial disease presented with similarly obscure, difficult-to-diagnose symptoms, requiring experimental treatments that were as complex as they were costly. It was as if fate, or some cruel cosmic joke, was repeating itself, forcing Michael to relive his worst nightmare, but this time with his only daughter. The insurance provided by Apex, despite being considered generous by janitorial standards, was woefully inadequate for the specialized care Lily needed. Michael was effectively a medical refugee, a brilliant mind exiled from his profession, now fighting a bureaucratic and biological war with one hand tied behind his back. Eleanor understood Michael's fierce independence, his profound distrust of authority figures, especially those from the corporate world she represented. His past betrayals, the way the system had chewed him up and spit him out, had hardened him. He would never accept direct financial aid. His pride, a fragile but powerful shield, would reject it instantly. Her initial objective of squashing a perceived threat was entirely misplaced. Her new, profound purpose was to help Michael regain his lost dignity, not with charity, but by utilizing his immense hidden talents to save his daughter and perhaps countless other children. She started to sketch out a plan, her formidable strategic mind now fully engaged, but focused on a human problem rather than a corporate one. This wasn't a hostile takeover. It was a rescue mission. The path, however, was fraught with obstacles. His medical license, though unfairly revoked, remained a significant legal hurdle. The hospital administration, still wary of past scandals and led by Dr. Evelyn Reed, a fiercely ambitious chief of staff, would be resistant to any external interference, especially from a former disgraced employee. Dr. Reed, Eleanor discovered through discreet inquiries, had benefited from Michael's forced departure years ago. She had risen swiftly through the ranks in the power vacuum Michael had left, and she harbored a quiet resentment towards him, seeing his very presence, even as a janitor, as a ghost from a past she preferred to keep buried, a threat to her carefully constructed career. Eleanor's own board, composed of cautious, profit-minded individuals, would undoubtedly view any personal crusade on her part as a dangerous conflict of interest, a sentimental distraction from Apex's bottom line. Their focus was quarterly reports, shareholder value, not the personal plight of a night shift janitor. They would require convincing a meticulously crafted argument that intertwined Michael's professional redemption with Apex's strategic interests, however tenuous that link might seem at first glance. The urgent ticking clock of Lily's deteriorating health hung heavy over all of them, adding an almost unbearable pressure to every decision. Eleanor knew a direct approach would fail. She needed a strategy as intricate and precise as the systems she managed at Apex, one that would not only clear Michael's name, but also dismantle the very structures that had allowed his tragedy to unfold. It was a daunting task, a labyrinth of legal, ethical, and corporate challenges, but watching Michael with Lily had ignited something profound within her, a spark of empathy that had long been dormant. If you believe in the power of a single person to change a broken system, and in the quiet strength of those who fight for what's right, please like this story. The next few days were a blur of intense, covert activity. Eleanor, usually a public figure, retreated into a private world of research and strategic planning. She spent hours delving into medical law, corporate ethics, and the complex intricacies of hospital power structures. She reviewed past Apex health plans, searching for loopholes, for avenues of aid that wouldn't feel like charity. She began to see the threads that connected Michael's tragedy to the larger tapestry of systemic injustice, a realization that solidified her resolve. The world, she now understood, was not merely a collection of logical systems and quarterly reports. It was a vast, intricate web of human stories, of individual struggles, of quiet acts of heroism and profound injustice. And she, Eleanor Vance, the CEO of Apex Innovations, was about to become an unexpected, formidable player in one of the most important stories she had ever encountered. The stakes were higher than any corporate merger, the outcome more crucial than any profit margin. A little girl's life and a good man's dignity depended on it. The air in the hospital, usually thick with the faint scent of antiseptic and stale coffee, now seemed to carry the faint, metallic tang of fear. Lily's condition, despite Michael's relentless, quiet efforts, had taken a sharp, brutal decline. The rhythmic beeping of her heart monitor, once a steady, reassuring pulse, now quickened and faltered, a desperate cadence against the encroaching silence. Her small, resilient smile had faded, replaced by a pallor that sent a cold spear of dread through Michael's heart. He was losing her, inch by agonizing inch, and the helplessness was a suffocating weight. The experimental therapies he'd meticulously researched, the obscure medications he'd lobbied for, were no longer enough. There was only one option left, an advanced experimental therapy available only at a specialized medical facility in Boston, Massachusetts. A treatment far beyond the reach of his janitor's salary and his limited Apex insurance. A chasm of cost that felt as vast and unyielding as the Atlantic itself. Michael, typically stoic, felt a raw, unfamiliar panic begin to claw at his throat. He spent his nights in Lily's room, reading Charlotte's Web until his voice was hoarse, singing lullabies until the first faint streaks of dawn appeared in the windows. He meticulously updated his spreadsheet, cross-referencing new data with a frantic intensity. But the numbers, the medical jargon, the complex protocols, all blurred into a desperate plea for time, for hope. Every medical article he read, every research paper, echoed the same agonizing truth. Lily was fading. The Boston clinic was her last best chance, and he, a brilliant doctor, reduced to scrubbing floors, was powerless to get her there. The weight of his pride, a heavy burden forged in the fires of past betrayals, began to crack under the relentless pressure of Lily's deteriorating health. He, Dr. Michael Thompson, once a celebrated pediatric intensivist, now contemplated begging. The thought was a bitter gall in his mouth, but Lily's life was worth any humiliation. Swallowing the last vestiges of his fierce independence, he approached Dr. Alan Peterson, a trusted former colleague and mentor at Coma. Peterson was a man of integrity, one of the few who had always believed in Michael, even after the scandal. He found Peterson in his office, buried under a mountain of charts, the faint glow of his desk lamp illuminating the exhaustion etched on his face. Michael, still in his janitor's uniform, felt the familiar prickle of shame, the sharp contrast between his past and present self. He laid out his case, not with emotion, but with the cold, hard facts of Lily's rare disease. He presented his meticulously compiled research, a thick binder overflowing with scientific papers, his own observations, and his desperate, brilliant analysis of the Boston treatment. Peterson, initially skeptical of a janitor bringing him advanced medical research, took the binder with a weary sigh. As Peterson flipped through the pages, a subtle shift occurred in his demeanor. His eyes, initially glazed with professional fatigue, began to sharpen, to focus. He saw not a janitor but the keen intellect, the rigorous scientific method, the profound medical acumen of the Dr. Michael Thompson he had once known. The data was impeccable, the insights groundbreaking. He listened, truly listened, as Michael spoke, his voice low and steady, about Lily's rare mitochondrial disease, about the specific genetic markers, about the precise mechanism of the experimental therapy in Boston. Peterson, deeply impressed, closed the binder, a slow nod of understanding spreading across his face. "Michael," he said, his voice quiet, "this is, extraordinary. You haven't lost your touch. Not at all." The words, simple yet profound, were a lifeline in Michael's sea of despair. Meanwhile, Eleanor Vance was orchestrating her own intricate counter-offensive, a strategy as complex and layered as any corporate takeover. Her formidable network, honed over decades of ruthless business, was now deployed for a different kind of conquest: justice. She leveraged Apex's vast resources not for profit but for truth. Her investigators, a team usually tasked with sniffing out industrial espionage or potential mergers, were now diving into Coma Children's Hospital's archives, poring over records from 8 years prior, the year of Sarah Thompson's death. This wasn't a casual inquiry. It was a full-blown forensic audit driven by Eleanor's unshakable belief that every detail mattered. What they uncovered was a sickening web of deception. Manipulated reports, internal reviews suppressed, critical evidence conveniently misplaced. A pattern of systemic negligence, a series of overlooked errors and understaffing issues that directly implicated several high-ranking hospital officials, and lurking subtly in the periphery, a chilling revelation. The then-junior Dr. Evelyn Reed, eager to climb the corporate ladder, had been subtly complicit. She hadn't pulled the trigger, but she had certainly helped bury the evidence, ensuring the narrative shifted away from systemic failure and onto Michael's shoulders. This wasn't merely a personal tragedy for Michael, it was a deeply buried corporate cover-up, a chilling revelation of injustice delayed, carefully orchestrated by those who valued reputation over truth. Eleanor felt a cold rage blossom in her chest, a fury that surpassed any she had ever felt from a bad quarterly report. This was not just business, this was human lives, shattered and discarded by an institution that claimed to heal. The depth of the corruption, the cynical calculation of it all, resonated with the quiet grief she carried for her own family's past loss. It solidified her resolve, transforming her initial empathy into a burning, righteous indignation. This system, this network of calculated lies, had to be dismantled. The stage was set. Michael, with Peterson's newfound support, had a glimmer of hope for Lily. Eleanor, armed with irrefutable evidence of a grave injustice, had the ammunition to ignite a revolution. The two disparate worlds, the quiet desperation of a janitor and the ruthless precision of a CEO, were about to collide. One evening, as the hospital lights hummed, casting a sterile glow on the quiet corridors, Eleanor approached Michael. He was sitting in a secluded alcove near Lily's room, a worn copy of Charlotte's Web in his hands, his face etched with worry. He looked up, his tired eyes registering surprise, then a flicker of apprehension at the sight of the formidable CEO. She was not in her usual power attire, but still dressed impeccably in a dark suit, her presence commanding, yet something in her gaze was different, softer perhaps, but still intensely focused. Eleanor didn't offer platitudes or empty sympathies. She didn't offer charity. Instead, she sat down opposite him, her voice low and steady as if sharing a corporate secret. "Michael," she began, her tone devoid of judgment, "I know about Lily, and I know about Sarah." Michael's shoulders stiffened, his jaw tightened. He looked at her, his eyes narrowed, wary, searching for the angle, the hidden agenda. "What are you talking about, Miss Vance?" he asked, his voice flat, guarded. Eleanor ignored the defensive posture. She pulled out a sleek tablet, its screen glowing softly in the dim light of the alcove. She didn't present him with a sob story, but with the cold, hard truth of her findings. She showed him snippets of the manipulated reports, the suppressed internal reviews, the meticulously reconstructed timeline of events surrounding Sarah's death. She pointed out the systemic negligence, the precise moment a crucial piece of equipment failed due to a lack of maintenance, an oversight that had been deliberately buried. She showed him the subtle complicity of the then junior Dr. Reed, her carefully worded emails, her discreet meetings, her calculated silence. Michael stared at the screen, his breath catching in his throat. His hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly. The unproven guilt he had carried for 8 long years, the festering wound, suddenly began to transform. The shame, the self-blame, slowly gave way to a dawning, terrible realization. It wasn't his fault. It never had been. The system, the very institution he had dedicated his life to, had betrayed him, had scapegoated him, had stripped him of his identity, and had left him to carry a burden that wasn't his. Tears, hot and unexpected, welled in Michael's eyes, blurring the damning evidence on the screen. He blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. He looked at Eleanor, a new kind of understanding in his gaze. This woman, the epitome of the corporate world he distrusted, was not here to accuse him, but to exonerate him. She had seen him, truly seen him, not as the invisible janitor, but as the brilliant doctor, the grieving husband, the desperate father. This is impossible," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I always knew, but they buried it so deep." Eleanor nodded, her expression grim. "They did, but it's not buried anymore, and it's going to change everything." She then laid out her plan, not as an offer of charity, but as a strategic partnership. "I won't just offer you a job, Michael. That would be an insult to your intelligence, to your integrity. I'm offering you a chance to reclaim your identity, to clear your name, and to secure Lily's future by exposing the very system that shattered your lives." She outlined her vision, not a handout, but a position that would leverage his unparalleled medical expertise. Apex Innovations, with its vast resources and cutting-edge technological infrastructure, was poised to enter the healthcare technology sector. They would establish a research and development division focused on rare pediatric diseases, particularly mitochondrial conditions. "We will fund it fully. We will build it around your expertise, around your research. You will direct it. You will oversee Lily's treatment directly with the best resources money can buy, and you will pioneer new therapies for children like her." Michael listened, his mind reeling. It was audacious, unbelievable, a plan that defied every cynical expectation he had ever held. He, a disgraced doctor, a night shift janitor, was being offered not just a second chance, but a chance to build something groundbreaking, something that could save Lily and countless other children. The weight of 8 years of grief, of unproven guilt, of fighting an invisible war began to lift, replaced by a surge of hope so powerful it almost buckled his knees. "But Dr. Reed, the hospital, they won't allow it," Michael said, his voice still tinged with the bitterness of past betrayals. Eleanor's lips curled into a faint, grim smile. "Dr. Reed and the hospital administration will have little say in the matter once the truth comes out. And believe me, Michael, the truth is about to explode into the public sphere. If you're willing to stand with me, to expose what they did, I will ensure not only your complete exoneration but also a future for Lily that is free from the financial and medical burdens that have haunted you." She paused, allowing the full weight of her proposal to sink in. "This isn't just about you, Michael. It's about every patient whose life was put at risk, every doctor who was silenced, every injustice that was swept under the rug. This is about accountability. And it's about giving a voice to those who have been silenced, just like you." The moment Eleanor revealed the intricate web of deception, Michael's world tilted on its axis, his past suffering illuminated by a sudden, stark clarity. If you've ever felt the profound injustice of a system designed to protect itself rather than its people, hit that like button and share this story. Michael looked from the tablet, where the damning evidence glowed, to Eleanor, her eyes unwavering, resolute. He saw not a ruthless CEO, but a woman driven by a fierce, uncompromising sense of justice. He thought of Lily, her fragile life hanging in the balance, and the hope that Eleanor's audacious plan offered. He thought of Sarah and the quiet dignity she deserved, a dignity that had been stolen by a callous cover-up. The pride, the distrust, the years of silent suffering, all began to recede, replaced by a burning desire for truth, for redemption, for Lily's future. He extended his hand, his eyes finally meeting hers, a silent pact forged in the shared understanding of profound loss and an unexpected, formidable alliance. The hospital room, usually a sanctuary of hushed whispers and medical murmurs, now felt charged with an almost unbearable tension. Michael clutched Eleanor's hand, a silent pact forged in the quiet desperation of Lily's flickering life. The weight of 8 years of unproven guilt, of fighting an invisible war, began to lift, replaced by a surge of hope so powerful it almost buckled his knees. But hope, he knew, was a fragile thing, easily shattered. The path ahead was fraught with obstacles, a labyrinth of legal, ethical, and corporate challenges. Yet looking at Eleanor, her eyes unwavering, resolute, he saw not a ruthless CEO, but a woman driven by a fierce, uncompromising sense of justice. He thought of Lily, her fragile life hanging in the balance, and the hope that Eleanor's audacious plan offered. He thought of Sarah and the quiet dignity she deserved, a dignity that had been stolen by a callous cover-up. The pride, the distrust, the years of silent suffering, all began to recede, replaced by a burning desire for truth, for redemption, for Lily's future. Eleanor, a whirlwind of calculated energy, immediately set her formidable machine in motion. She convened an emergency, highly confidential meeting with her most trusted legal team and her head of public relations at Apex. The room buzzed with an unusual intensity, far removed from the typical quarterly projections and market analyses. She laid out the facts with precise, unsparing detail. The systemic negligence, the manipulated reports, the suppressed internal reviews, Dr. Reed's subtle complicity, and the tragic consequences that had irrevocably altered Michael Thompson's life and now threatened his daughter's. Her legal team, initially stunned, quickly grasped the gravity and the potential ramifications of the scandal. This wasn't just about clearing one man's name. It was about exposing a systemic failure that could rock the medical community and establish Apex as a champion of ethical conduct and patient advocacy. Her head of public relations, a shrewd strategist named David, recognized the immense, albeit risky, opportunity to redefine Apex's public image, shifting from a cold, profit-driven entity to one committed to social responsibility. "This is not a charity case, gentlemen," Eleanor stated, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "This is an unprecedented opportunity to right a grave injustice and to position Apex Innovations at the forefront of healthcare technology and ethical corporate governance. We will not merely fund a research center. We will build a beacon of hope, leveraging Michael's unparalleled expertise, but first we expose the truth." Their strategy was multi-pronged, a meticulously choreographed dance between legal maneuvering and media exposure. Eleanor was a master of timing, understanding that the greatest impact came from a well-placed, undeniable truth. They began by discreetly preparing a comprehensive legal dossier, a thick compilation of all the incriminating evidence against Coma Children's Hospital and its involved officials. This wasn't just for a lawsuit, it was for an independent oversight committee, a body whose mandate was to investigate and address systemic failures within the healthcare system. Simultaneously, David, under Eleanor's strict guidance, began to cultivate a relationship with a prominent investigative journalism team at the Chicago Tribune. This wasn't a casual leak. It was a carefully managed drip feed of verifiable information designed to build a compelling narrative, piece by agonizing piece, without revealing the full extent of Apex's involvement until the opportune moment. The journalists, sensing a story of immense public interest, eagerly delved into the fragments of information provided, their initial skepticism giving way to a growing sense of outrage. Eleanor, however, never lost sight of the human element. While the legal and media machines hummed, she frequently visited Lily, sometimes sitting in the alcove near her room, sometimes observing Michael. She brought books, small, thoughtful gifts for Lily, and always a quiet, unwavering presence. She saw the subtle improvements in Lily's health after Peterson, emboldened by Michael's research and Eleanor's discreet pressure, managed to fast-track some less invasive experimental treatments within coma. But the Boston treatment remained the ultimate goal, a distant light at the end of a very long, dark tunnel. Michael, meanwhile, began to work closely with Eleanor, not just as a silent partner, but as an active participant in his own redemption. He meticulously reviewed the legal dossier, adding his own detailed insights, his medical knowledge proving invaluable in pinpointing the exact failures in Sarah's case. He met with Eleanor's legal team, his quiet dignity and unshakable conviction leaving a profound impression. He still worked his janitor shifts, maintaining his cover, but now his movements held a new purpose, a secret fire burning beneath his stoic exterior. The injustice, once a heavy weight, now fueled a fierce, controlled determination. Dr. Evelyn Reed, however, sensed a shift in the hospital's atmosphere. Whispers of an impending investigation, of old ghosts being stirred, began to circulate through the administrative offices. She saw Michael, still scrubbing floors but with a new, almost imperceptible air of defiance. She saw Eleanor Vance, the formidable CEO, making increasingly frequent discreet visits to coma, her presence an ominous shadow. Reed, ever the opportunist, felt a tremor of unease. She began to subtly reinforce her position, aligning herself with powerful board members, subtly discrediting any whispers of past wrongdoing. She was a master manipulator, and she wouldn't go down without a fight. Her quiet resentment towards Michael, born of guilt and self-preservation, festered, growing into a cold fury. The decisive moment arrived with the brutal swiftness of a Chicago winter storm. Lily's condition, despite Michael's relentless efforts and the initial minor improvements, took a sharp decline, requiring the advanced experimental therapy available only at the specialized medical facility in Boston. This was the moment Eleanor had been waiting for, the emotional pivot point, the catalyst that would force the public to confront the stark reality of the hospital's past negligence and its present consequences. Eleanor didn't waste a second. She orchestrated a masterstroke, a carefully planned public exposé designed to maximize impact. Her team, under David's direction, first strategically leaked the entirety of the damning evidence of the cover-up to the Chicago Tribune. The investigative journalism team, now fully briefed and armed with irrefutable proof, was prepared to run a front-page exposé that would rip through the medical community. The timing was crucial. It needed to hit just as she delivered her own findings. Simultaneously, Eleanor, without preamble, presented her complete findings to the hospital's independent oversight committee. She arrived with her legal team, a formidable presence in the usually hushed committee room. Her presentation was not an accusation, but a meticulously constructed narrative of facts, supported by hundreds of pages of documented evidence, expert testimonies, and Michael's own harrowing account. She laid bare the systemic failures, the individual culpabilities, the cold, calculated decisions that had led to Sarah Thompson's death and now threatened Lily's. The committee members, seasoned professionals who had seen their share of hospital politics, were initially skeptical, but Eleanor's presentation was irrefutable. The evidence was overwhelming. The timeline, undeniable. The silence in the room was palpable, heavy with the weight of revelation. Just as Eleanor concluded her presentation, the Chicago Tribune hit the newsstands. Its bold, screaming headlines splashed across the front page. Coma cover-up, how hospital negligence silenced a doctor and cost a life. The accompanying article, a detailed, harrowing account of Sarah Thompson's death, and the subsequent manipulation of evidence went viral instantly. The digital edition crashed within minutes. Social media exploded with outrage. The story was picked up by national news outlets within hours. The scandal ripped through the medical community with the force of a Category 5 hurricane. Coma Children's Hospital, once a respected institution, was now a pariah. The public outcry was deafening. The Independent Oversight Committee, unable to ignore the public pressure and the irrefutable evidence, immediately launched a full-scale public investigation. Dr. Evelyn Reed, her carefully constructed career crumbling around her, was forced into a public resignation, her name forever tainted by the scandal. Other high-ranking officials implicated in the cover-up were either fired or faced legal action. The hospital's board of directors, facing unprecedented public pressure and the threat of massive lawsuits, initiated a sweeping overhaul of Coma's internal protocols, promising full transparency and a renewed commitment to patient safety. In the midst of the chaos, a nationally televised press conference was called. Michael Thompson, no longer the invisible janitor, but a figure of quiet dignity, stood beside Eleanor Vance. His name, once synonymous with disgrace, was sensationally cleared. The story of his 8-year ordeal, of his silent battle for Lily, captured the nation's heart. His former brilliance as a pediatric intensivist was publicly recognized, his medical license immediately reinstated. He was hailed as a hero, a man who had fought against an unjust system and emerged victorious thanks to the unexpected alliance with Eleanor Vance. If you're moved by stories of justice finally served and the power of unexpected alliances, give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to see it. Eleanor, leveraging her newfound influence and Apex's now redefined public image, announced the establishment of the Lily Thompson Center for Pediatric Rare Diseases at Coma. It was an innovative research and treatment facility, funded entirely by Apex Innovations, dedicated to pioneering experimental therapies for conditions like Lily's. The center, a gleaming symbol of hope and progress, was designed to be a testament to Michael's unwavering dedication and Eleanor's new vision for corporate responsibility. She appointed Michael as its director, not merely as a doctor, but as a visionary leader, allowing him to directly oversee his daughter's treatment while contributing his unparalleled expertise to a cause deeply personal to him. The journey to Boston, once a distant, impossible dream, was now a reality. Lily, accompanied by Michael and a team of dedicated specialists from the newly established center, traveled to the specialized medical facility. The groundbreaking treatment, tailored to her specific mitochondrial disease, began immediately. The waiting, the watching, the agonizing uncertainty continued, but now it was imbued with a new sense of hope, a shared belief in the power of redemption and the promise of a brighter future. The transformation wasn't just limited to Coma or to Michael. Witnessing his unwavering dedication, Lily's miraculous progress, and the profound impact of their shared crusade, Eleanor underwent a profound personal and professional transformation. Her corporate philosophy shifted dramatically, integrating a human-first approach into Apex's core values. She championed accessible healthcare solutions, robust employee well-being programs, and ethical corporate governance, transforming Apex into a leader in social responsibility. The company, once known solely for its ruthless efficiency, now became synonymous with innovation and integrity, a testament to Eleanor's evolving vision. The bond between Eleanor and Michael, born from suspicion and forged in shared adversity, transcended their initial roles. It became a powerful testament to how genuine human connection, integrity, and a fierce commitment to justice could not only mend broken hearts and shattered systems, but also redefine the very meaning of success. The climax had passed, the truth revealed, the battle fought, but the journey of healing and transformation had only just begun. The sterile scent of the Boston clinic, usually a clinical assault on the senses, now felt like a fragrance of hope. Lily, her small body connected to an array of monitoring equipment, was receiving the groundbreaking experimental treatment. Michael sat by her bedside, his hand gently clasped around hers, the worn copy of Charlotte's Web lying open on the bedside table. His face, once perpetually etched with worry, now held a delicate balance of tension and relief. The journey from Chicago had been a whirlwind, a blur of media attention, legal proceedings, and the overwhelming task of setting up the Lily Thompson Center. But here, in this quiet room, all that faded away. Only Lily mattered. Only the slow, steady beat of her heart, monitored by machines and by her father's unwavering gaze, held any true significance. The treatment was aggressive, pushing her fragile system to its limits, but there was a quiet strength in her, a resilience that echoed her father's own. Eleanor, after ensuring Michael and Lily were settled in Boston, returned to Chicago. The aftermath of the scandal at Coma Children's Hospital was still rippling through the city and the national medical community. The Chicago Tribune's exposé had ignited a firestorm, leading to widespread reforms and a re-evaluation of medical ethics. Dr. Evelyn Reed's public resignation was only the first domino to fall. Several other high-ranking hospital officials implicated in the cover-up faced charges of negligence and obstruction of justice. The once proud institution was now in a period of painful, necessary rebuilding under the watchful eye of the Independent Oversight Committee. Apex Innovations, under Eleanor's visionary leadership, was simultaneously undergoing its own profound transformation. The media, initially captivated by the scandal and Apex's role in exposing it, now turned its attention to Eleanor's audacious pivot. The establishment of the Lily Thompson Center for Pediatric Rare Diseases, entirely funded by Apex, was lauded as a groundbreaking initiative, a paradigm shift in corporate social responsibility. Eleanor, once seen as the embodiment of ruthless efficiency, was now being celebrated as a compassionate visionary, a CEO who dared to put humanity before profit. She embraced this new identity, not as a calculated PR move, but as a genuine evolution of her own principles. The ghost of her family's past loss, the system failure that had shaped her, now spurred her to prevent such tragedies for others. She championed accessible healthcare solutions, robust employee well-being programs, and ethical corporate governance. Apex's core values were redefined, expanding beyond innovation and market dominance to include integrity, empathy, and social impact. This wasn't merely a rebranding, it was a fundamental shift in the company's DNA, driven by Eleanor's personal journey. Back in Boston, days bled into weeks. The doctors at the specialized clinic were cautiously optimistic. Lily's response to the experimental therapy was slow but steady. There were good days, when she could sit up, her eyes bright, a faint smile gracing her lips, and Michael would read her another chapter of Charlotte's Web, his voice filled with a profound gratitude. And there were bad days, when her small body struggled, when the monitors beeped with a frantic urgency, and Michael would spend sleepless nights by her bedside, his medical knowledge a comfort, his fatherly love an endless wellspring of strength. He had started working remotely as the director of the Lily Thompson Center, his mind still sharp, his research continuing with a renewed vigor. He collaborated with the Boston team, offering insights gleaned from his years as a pediatric intensivist and his intense personal study of Lily's disease. The official reinstatement of his medical license felt less like a vindication and more like a tool, a means to an end, saving Lily, and in time, countless other children. His once shattered life was slowly, painstakingly, beginning to mend. The unspoken guilt of Sarah's death, though officially disproven, remained a phantom limb, a dull ache that only Lily's recovery could truly alleviate. He often thought of Eleanor, of her unwavering support, her unexpected allyship. Their bond, forged in the crucible of suspicion and adversity, had become something deeper, a mutual respect born of shared purpose. Eleanor visited Boston frequently, flying in on her private jet, her schedule meticulously cleared to spend time with Michael and Lily. She wasn't just observing, she was learning. She witnessed Michael's unwavering dedication, his gentle strength, the quiet resilience of Lily. These visits were a stark contrast to her high-stakes corporate world, a quiet balm to her soul. She would sit with Lily, reading to her, sharing stories of Chicago, bringing small gifts that always brought a flicker of light to the little girl's eyes. She saw the profound impact of Michael's presence on Lily's recovery, the undeniable connection between a father's love and a child's will to live. One afternoon during one of Eleanor's visits, Lily had a particularly good day. She was stronger, her appetite returning, her spirit brighter. Michael was beaming, a rare, genuine smile gracing his lips. Eleanor watched them, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with corporate success or market shares. She saw a father finally reclaiming his life, a daughter slowly but steadily coming back from the brink. The success of the center, the transformation of Apex, the redemption of Michael, all coalesced into this single, precious moment of hope. The bond between Eleanor and Michael, once a strained alliance of convenience, had deepened into a profound mutual respect and an unspoken understanding. They had both experienced loss, both been shaped by systems that could be both brilliant and brutal. They had both found redemption in an unexpected alliance. Their conversations were no longer purely strategic. They touched on life, on purpose, on the profound impact of human connection. Eleanor confided in Michael about her own past, the system failure that had cost her family dearly, explaining the root of her relentless pursuit of control. Michael listened, offering a quiet empathy that she hadn't realized she craved. The public, captivated by their story, followed Lily's progress with bated breath. The Chicago Tribune continued its in-depth coverage, transforming the initial scandal into a triumphant narrative of redemption and hope. Lily's small, resilient smile, often featured in articles and news segments, became a beacon of hope in the newly transformed hospital wing, a symbol of what could be achieved when individuals fought for justice and compassion. If you've been on this journey with Eleanor and Michael and feel the power of their story, make sure to like and share this video. Your support helps us tell more stories of transformation and resilience. Lily's recovery was slow, arduous, but unwavering. After months of intensive treatment in Boston, she was stable enough to return to Chicago, to the very center named in her honor. The Lily Thompson Center for Pediatric Rare Diseases at Coma, now a fully operational, cutting-edge facility, was a testament to the power of a single individual's fight and a CEO's unexpected transformation. Michael, as its director, oversaw his daughter's continued care, ensuring she received the best possible treatment. But more than that, he led a team of brilliant researchers and compassionate doctors, pioneering new experimental therapies for children suffering from similar rare conditions. His vision, once dismissed, was now celebrated, saving lives and offering hope to countless families. Eleanor, witnessing Michael's unwavering dedication and Lily's miraculous progress, felt a profound internal shift. Her corporate philosophy had indeed evolved. Apex Innovations became a leader in ethical business practices, investing heavily in research and development for accessible healthcare technologies and implementing groundbreaking employee wellness programs. Her focus was no longer solely on profit, but on purpose, on making a tangible, positive impact on the world. She continued to lead Apex with her characteristic brilliance, but now it was tempered by a deep wellspring of empathy and a renewed sense of human connection. The bond between Eleanor and Michael, born from suspicion and forged in shared adversity, transcended their initial roles. It became a powerful testament to how genuine human connection, integrity, and a fierce commitment to justice could not only mend broken hearts and shattered systems, but also redefine the very meaning of success. Michael had regained his lost dignity, not as a charity case, but as a respected leader, a brilliant doctor, and above all, a loving father whose daughter was thriving. Lily, a living symbol of resilience and hope, became the quiet inspiration behind a movement for change in healthcare. Her small, resilient smile, once a source of agonizing fear, was now a vibrant, undeniable affirmation of life, a testament to the power of a father's love and the unexpected alliance that saved her. The narrative of her illness and recovery, once a personal tragedy, had blossomed into a universal message of hope, inspiring millions and becoming the beating heart of a movement that transcended the sterile walls of any hospital. The old life, the old identities were gone, replaced by a new reality, shaped by courage, compassion, and an unshakable belief in the possibility of redemption.